Hey, I recently covered a study that's made the rounds on social media, made a little bit of a splash on if non-nutritive sweeteners, so think like aspartame, xylitol, saccharin, those kinds of kind of sweeteners that are not sugar and are a replacement for sugar, how those are now related to faster cognitive decline. And that comes from a particular study. Now, I did a full analysis of that on my main channel, and I wasn't really going to cover it again, but Dr. Layne Norton released a short video where he discusses it. So I really wanted to go through that because ultimately I disagree with his take on this study for multiple reasons. I know that my last video is also on Layne Norton. I'm not trying to pick on Dr. Norton. As usual, I really respect his work and whatnot. It's just turns out that we have a difference in opinion on a few topics. So the next video will not be on Layne Norton. I'll go ahead and guarantee that because I don't want to seem like I'm picking on any particular person. But without further ado, let's get into the video and then I'll explain some of the areas where I disagree with Dr. Norton.
Artificial sweeteners are going to cause you to be stupid. So a new study just dropped out of Brazil looking at the intakes of artificially sweetened beverages and cognitive decline. And spoiler alert, they found that basically there was a dose response of artificially sweetened beverage intake on the risk of cognitive decline. Now, I want to point out this is cohort data, this is epidemiology, hard to draw conclusions from it, but it's getting a lot of play. When it comes to artificially sweetened beverages, there are a lot of confounding variables here. And very clearly in research literature, there has been shown reverse causality with this. So people who take in more artificially sweetened beverages are more likely to be obese and more likely to have type 2 diabetes. Now, I'm sure the anti-artificial sweetener people will say, well, that's because those beverages are causing obesity. But what about the human randomized controlled trials where they show the exact opposite, that artificially sweetened beverages...
Okay, let me stop there real quick because we're actually shifting the story at this point. So what the study showed was that there was this association. They looked at 9,000 individuals. I believe it was 9,000, maybe it was 12,000. Let me double check that real quick. Yes, around 9,000 individuals, and they split them up based off of their non-nutritive sweetener consumption and tracked them over 8 years and tried to determine if there was an effect on cognitive outcomes. So like memory, verbal fluency, things of that nature. And what they found is that those that consume more non-nutritive sweeteners have a greater or faster cognitive decline than those that consume less. Now, what Dr. Norton is talking about with reverse causality is that people who are generally less healthy will consume more non-nutritive sweeteners. It's actually the fact that they're less healthy that is the cause of this cognitive decline, this more rapid cognitive decline. Now, this is, to me, shifting the goalposts because, and it's not really doing justice to the analysis because the researchers of this correlation study, this associative study that we're going over, this 8-year study, did adjust for body weight. They not only adjusted for body weight, but they also adjusted for caloric intake. And on top of that, so 3 levels, another level that they took things, which isn't that common with a lot of the epidemiology that I've seen, is that they also controlled for diet quality within reason. I mean, it's not like they're able to tease out every little granule of information, but unlike other epidemiological studies that I've seen, this one did try to segment based off of diet quality. So looking based off of how close people were to what's deemed as a healthy brain-centric diet called the MIND diet. So to say that this is based off, this whole correlation is due to reverse causality or that it's due to the fact that people are unhealthy, well, again, they've adjusted for this across a number of different strata. So I would completely disagree with him on that front. But let's listen on because I do agree with him that We'll listen on, and then I'll jump back in.
Where they show the exact opposite, that artificially sweetened beverages actually decrease body weight and, if anything, improve insulin sensitivity and glycemia. The reason this is important is because human randomized control trials, because of the randomization process and the controlling of variables, is what we can actually infer conclusions from. So those show the opposite.
Okay, so this is what I'm talking about with shifting the goalposts, right? We're talking about cognitive decline, but here Dr. Norton is talking about body weight and fat loss. And those aren't the same thing. I know he's trying to create this relationship between them, but that's very much an assumption. And as I explained, I don't think that's a fair assumption based off of the statistical adjustments that were made in that prospective, in that cohort study, that associative study that we're focused on. So, but in the big picture, yes, I absolutely do agree with him that artificial sweeteners, non-nutritive sweeteners, they do contribute to weight loss and fat loss and are net positive when you're looking at those outcomes. And that's something that I feel very strongly about, and I feel strongly about it because I think it has great reasoning behind it, is that we can't extrapolate, or we can't expand our definition of what's good or bad just because one outcome changes for the better. So weight loss is improved with non-nutritive sweeteners. Great. We agree there. But does that then mean that we can't see any negative effects on cognitive function? No, it doesn't. We would have to test that next. And this is where things start to get a lot less certain than I think Dr. Norton is giving credit for, but we'll listen on.
So how do we explain the association? If we also look at artificially sweetened beverages and overall diet quality, what we see is the people who consume more artificially sweetened beverages have worse overall diet quality. They also are more likely to make dieting attempts, weight loss attempts. What this means is people who are overweight or obese are more likely to consume these beverages. Not that these beverages are causing obesity. When it comes to cognitive decline, I wonder if obesity is associated with cognitive decline. Oh, wait, there it is. Yes, it is. If you are obese, it is associated with cognitive decline.
Okay, again, we've already addressed it before. They adjusted for all that. The other critique that I have is that while it is true that we have many randomized control trials, and he's absolutely right that randomized control trials allow us to infer more causality as opposed to just correlation, like this main analysis that we're going over. But that said, while there are many randomized control trials that look at body fat or look at obesity, body weight in general, look at body composition, I was really surprised when I looked at the literature, and it showed very, very few randomized control trials looking at cognitive outcomes. So looking at like memory, which is definitely something that you can measure in a short-term trial. So looking at 16 weeks or 6 months or whatever it might be. So you can do randomized control trials and look at cognitive outcomes. But unfortunately, while there are a few, the methodology of those studies is pretty poor. So for example, they'll compare against sugar and say, oh, well, it's better than sugar. Well, I mean, that's fine. And that's not necessarily a bad comparison, but does it tell me all the information that I need to know to feel really secure that non-nutritive sweeteners are not going to be a negative to my brain and my brain function? No, it's not. And then there's some other methodological issues that I ran across for some of the studies. Not to mention, again, just to reiterate my first point, that there's so few studies. I mean, we're talking for fat loss and whatnot, you might find 30, 40 studies, but for brain function, you might find like 3 studies. And not to mention that this is, let's say, like 2 studies for aspartame and then like 1 study for, I don't know, I'm thinking off the top of my head, like sorbitol. I don't know, I'm just coming up with one. That doesn't then, we can't then extrapolate that out or broaden that out to, oh, we have studies that show there's safety for aspartame, so therefore xylitol is also helpful and perfectly safe. We can't do that. And so that's why making this relationship, this assumption that because we have so many randomized control trials for fat loss, that then it is then safe for our cognition, I just think is a complete false story, a false way to go about this. So I would definitely disagree with Dr. Norton on that. And I'll have one more point that I'll mention in just a minute, but let's finish what he has to say.
And we also have mechanistic data to back this up as well. It is not that artificially sweetened beverages are causing cognitive decline. That is not what's happening. What is happening is people who tend to choose to consume artificially sweetened beverages, these individuals tend to be more unhealthy overall because of their other lifestyle factors, and that causes cognitive decline.
So the other point that I wanted to make here is that, I'm not going to refute again for like the second or third time that, this is probably not reverse causality, at least the way that he's explaining it, because of the adjustments that were made. But beyond that, the researchers actually took things a step further to address some of those potential concerns, in that they did some subgroup analyses where they broke up the data. So the 9,000 individuals, the data that they collected from those individuals, they broke it up based off of, do these people have diabetes or do they not? And while it is true that there was a stronger association for people with diabetes, meaning that non-nutritive sweeteners, if, and that's a huge word there, if, I just want to be clear about that, if it did cause cognitive decline, it would have a greater effect for people that are in a metabolically compromised situation. Keyword there, if. I'm not saying that they do. We can't do that based off of this study. But it still sets up some kind of alarm bells of like, okay, some just cautionary bells of like, maybe we should hold off on any sort of assumptions. But the other side of that is that while they looked at people with type 2 diabetes, they also looked at people that did not have type 2 diabetes. And while the relationship was weaker, they still found a relationship between non-nutritive sweeteners after they had removed the people with diabetes and only looked at the people without diabetes. So generally healthier. Probably not everybody in that subgroup was perfectly healthy or anything, but still generally healthier. And they still found a relationship. And the strongest relationship was also found with specific non-nutritive sweeteners. So I mentioned this in my main channel video, but the xylitol and erythritol were still statistically significantly associated with reduced cognitive health. So in the big picture, do I think that we should be panicking? No, I don't. I still think that for many outcomes, and I'm trying to highlight these words as much as possible so people hear me. For many outcomes, non-nutritive sweeteners are a positive to our health. Weight loss, fat loss, body composition, etc. That has been well established, and we don't really need to try to drudge that up and say, oh, now this is in question. It's not in question. But what is in question is that because we have now this association, and this association was controlled for potential factors that could explain the association, and yet the association persisted between non-nutritive sweeteners and cognitive decline. And in addition to that, so that alone is not enough to truly worry me. But what truly worries me is that plus the lack of randomized controlled trials. Now we're kind of swimming in an ocean of darkness, trying to understand, are they having a negative effect on our cognitive health? And the answer to me is, I don't know. I can't answer that honestly. So I'm not as dismissive as Dr. Norton is, but I'm also not going to be an alarmist and say that you should quit all non-nutritive sweeteners. I think we're in a bit of a gray zone here where I would like to see more studies that have been done on all the different non-nutritive sweeteners and see what kind of impact that they have on our cognitive health. That's where I stand. That's why I disagree with Dr. Norton on this. But like I said, for sure, and many of his other content, I really strongly agree with him, and he puts out great work. Anyway, thanks for tuning in. Just wanted to jump on here and give you my 2 cents. I'll catch you in the next one. See ya.